keep pushing it back.
It's 7 o'clock.
And we're supposed to start in the afternoon, now we're supposed to start in the morning. That's the big question.
Good evening, everyone. The Lapeer Community School Board of Education meeting is now called to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. LaBarre, would you guide us through the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. LaBarre. Okay, we will, for our meeting this evening, start with the organizational business. So we have the election of school board officers and appointment of school staff for 2024, and then also the appointment of board committees. So we will begin with nominations for the president.
I would like to nominate Ms. Summer Putnam as president. Second.
Okay. Any other nominations for this evening? Okay. Mrs. McKenna? Aye. Mrs. LeBlanc?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hofer? Aye. Ms. Novak? Dr. Novak, I'm so sorry. Ms. Pennon says aye. Motion carries. Okay, and now we will have nominations for secretary.
I'd like to nominate Lisa Novak for secretary.
Okay. Any other nominations this evening? Okay. Mrs. McKenna? Aye. Mrs. LaBarre?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hofer? Aye. Dr. Novak? Aye. Ms. Summer Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay. Then we have nomination for vice president.
I nominate Craig Watson for vice president.
Support. Okay. Any other nominations? Mrs. McKenna? Aye. Mrs. LaBarre?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hofer? Dr. Novak? Ms. Putnam says aye. Motion passes. Okay. Nomination for treasurer. So our practice has been to have the assistant superintendent for business operations serve as treasurer for the board.
I'll make a motion that Mark Rager, the assistant superintendent for business, be appointed as treasurer.
Support.
Okay. I have motion and support. Mrs. McKenna? Aye. Mrs. LaBarre?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hofer? Dr. Novak? Ms. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Then we have appointment of recording secretary. So we are typically recommend that Mary Moss remain the recording secretary for the Board of Education.
I'll make that motion. I'll support that.
Okay? So we have the motion and support. Ms. McKenna? Aye. Mrs. LaBarre?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hofer? Aye. Dr. Novak? Aye. Ms. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, I think that concludes the election portion. We will go with the appointment of board committees. So we are recommending continuing with this year our 5-committee structure that we've had, similar to 23, which is finance and operations, student advocacy and communication, teaching, learning and technology, personnel, and our policy committee. We will leave the legislative ad hoc committee, will be utilized as needed basis.
I'll make a motion that the board president be authorized to appoint board committee members and chairpersons to the following committees for 2024: finance and operation, student advocacy and communication, teaching, learning, and technology, personnel, and policy. The board president will also be authorized to appoint members and chairpersons to the legislative ad hoc committee.
Support.
I have a motion and support. discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Mrs. McKenna?
Aye.
Mrs. LeBron?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hofer? Dr. Novak?
Aye.
Ms. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. So I did send out, I did send out a committee structure. No?
We usually keep the vote ahead, so it doesn't, remember what you want.
Yeah, so I did keep it, but I thought I sent it out to everybody again. Maybe I didn't, so I will definitely do that after meeting this afternoon.
Ms. Recording Secretary, will you take note of that?
I swear I sent it out already, but okay, maybe I was ahead of myself. I will get that out to you, first thing tomorrow morning. Okay, so that will conclude our organizational business. So we will then go to our presenting school this evening, so I'll turn it over to you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Stacy Weber, our principal at Brookfield, and creative members of her staff to present to the board on Goal 2-1A. Stacy?
How are you tonight? Good. So we are, I brought with me Mrs. Tammy Curry and Mrs. Lee Mile. Tammy is our learning coach and teaches third grade, so they'll come up in a couple minutes and they will talk to you also about this goal that we have. So tonight we're just going to talk about how at Murphy we are empowering our students. So just to look quickly at our, kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about the board goal. We're going to talk about how our board goal goes along with Danielson and hits a bullseye on that one. We're data days, small groups in action, and then we're going to bring it all together so that you understand how we're working best for our students at Murphy. So this is just our board goal, which you all know. So it's really 2-1A, which is 100% of teachers will apply K-12 essentials practices as developed by General Education Leadership Network, Kagan Strategies, Structures, and Questioning. We did pick the K-12 essential, and our essential is essential number 3. So basically what essential number 3 is it's small group reading. So it's small group and individual instruction using a variety of grouping strategies, most often with flexible groups formed and instruction targeted to children's observed and assessed needs in specific aspects of literacy and development. So really what that means, if we look at it, I have some underlined words in there. We're talking small groups, so we're talking 4 to 5 kids in a group. Sometimes it is individual instruction, so sometimes the teachers are doing one-on-one instruction. We're looking at different grouping strategies when we're doing this. So it may be by ability, it may be by needs, it could be by interest or by choice. So it's changing. That flexible grouping, we're looking at our formative data all the time, and those groups are going to change because as kids get to know what they need from that group, we're moving them to another group and we're regrouping them. So we're making sure that our kids are getting what they need at all times. And then right going with that observed and assessed needs, we're constantly using data to form those groups. What do our kids need? How are we best going to help them? So the next thing that we have, one coming up, is this is the bullseye for Danielson. So how does this go with our Danielson? So when we look at it, essential number 3 actually has 5 bullet points in it. So when we talk about the bullet points, it kind of goes through and tells us exactly what is in that whole essential. So the first bullet point says that most of the time students are reading and writing. So in Danielson, that goes right along with our domain 2C, managing classroom procedures. So an example of what that would be is our teachers are constantly trying to build stamina within the classroom for reading and writing. So we're looking at getting them to be able to extend that time for reading and writing so that they can use it over an extended period of time. So that's mostly what's happening in the classroom. So when our small groups are pulled, or when they, other things are going on, they're always reading or writing, because we know that that's what our kids need, especially in our elementaries. Bullet number 2 talks about that the teachers are actually, they coach the children as they engage in reading and writing. It goes with Danielson, 3A, communication with students. So an example of this is that the teacher would teach maybe the whole group as they're all sitting there, going to teach them like different ones. And then as they're reading within the book, they're going to remind them of that strategy. They're going to coach them through that strategy when they come to a word that is unknown for them. So it's really looking at that. What is it and why are we doing it? So what would be that one? Why? Because this is going to help us to be able to read this book. This is going to get us to figure out words that maybe we would not know otherwise. The third bullet talks about the teacher develops practices for reading fluency, repeated, echo, paired, and partner reading. This goes with Danielson, which is domain 3C, engaging students in learning. So for this one, a great example is paired reading. What paired reading is we take a student who is a more fluent reader, put them with a student that is a less fluent reader, and they pair up and they read. And normally what happens is the more fluent one is going to read the book to the less fluent reader, and then they're going to switch it and do it the other way, and then the less fluent is going to do it with the other. So they're working in cooperation together. Bullet number 4 would be teacher includes explicit instruction, word recognition, decoding, text structures, and comprehension. That is domain 3B, using questioning and discussions. So for this, the teacher builds on and uses students' responses. And so when we think about, like comprehension, when they're finished reading a book, we're not just done with it. We're asking questions, or maybe we're writing about it. We're doing something with that book to get that comprehension, to get that going in there. And then the last bullet on this one is the teacher is deliberate in providing quality instruction to children in all groups. And it's really important to talk about in all groups, because this is for all of our students. This is something we do with all students. So with Danielson, it's domain 3E, which is demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness. And it's really talking about that differentiated instruction for all students based on those needs, while using different strategies to meet those needs. So again, an example of that would be like a contingent teacher. A teacher who is constantly looking and listening for what those next steps are. What does this kid need next? We see what they're doing, I'm listening to them, and I'm making notes about it, or I'm thinking about, okay, what am I going to do with the next time that I have through? What do they need from me? So this part, this goes right into, this last bullet goes right into our next step, because we're really talking about how we're looking, listening, using our data. So we want to talk a little bit about data days, and I'm going to have Mrs. Curry come up and talk to you about what our data days are in this district.
We have data days 3 times a year for our teachers, and each teacher gets a half a day to analyze data students in their classroom. So when we have data days, we are identifying and targeting students' their needs. So I'm passing out something to you that just explains our tiered instruction. So when we talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, I'm going to explain that to you a little bit, what that means. So during our data, we're identifying students, and then we're planning for small groups, and then I just put in the protocol for our documentation that we use. So when we identify and we target students, we're looking at all students in the classroom. We're looking mainly at 2 data points. We have some NLP assessments, and we also have their NWEA assessments that they take on reading. We use both data points. We have, we have different, ways that we use them to either target them, or if they're, a tier 1 instruction, that's fine. I just did that up there, and I'm not really gonna go through how, like the specifics of, what that is. But our tiered instruction means that we have tier 1. When we're talking about tier 1 instruction, we're talking about the instruction to the whole class, the whole group instruction, and then all of our students. So as you can see, the green right here is all students in the classroom. And these students are also getting small group instruction. It's not just our target students. So when we talk about grouping our students, it is for all students. So when we are looking at database and we're looking at targeted students, we're really looking at tier 2 and tier 3 students. So our tier 2 students are students that are just below the expectations for that grade level. And so they would receive the green, which is the tier 1 instruction, and they would also receive small group targeted instruction. So we're really digging into their data to see specifically what they need and what their next steps are. And then we have our tier 3 students that are students who are usually significantly below grade level. So as we identify them, they are receiving tier 1 instruction with the whole class. They're also receiving a small group targeted instruction. And then on top of that, they're either receiving one-on-one instruction or another small group instruction that is usually a smaller group. Their priority need, or what they need, is the same throughout all of the groups, so that they're receiving that same instruction, but in different ways. So as we plan for small groups, we have things that we need to accomplish during our database. And the first is called an intervention reading plan. We call it the IRIS. And that is specifically a form made so that we can communicate with families on what your child needs. So the teacher will look at the 2 data points. They'll look at maybe anecdotal notes from what they've observed in class, and we will find a priority need for each student. So as we plan, we use a cover sheet that's like this, and it has the tiered instructions that they need, and then their priority needs. So we will communicate that home with parents. We also have an intervention plan, which is this, and it has all the information for the group that the teacher needs, or maybe for an intervention person that's within our school. We also have this attendance sheet, so we know how often the student is receiving that intervention. So for tier 3 instruction, students are receiving this small group instruction 5 days a week. And then the tier 2 instruction, they're receiving the intervention 3 days a week. So we record all that, so we know how many times we're seeing those kids. Now with tier 1 instruction, we don't keep all this documentation, but they're also receiving that tier 1 instruction, and the teacher may be pulling small groups during that time, and they're keeping maybe separate documentation on that with anecdotal notes. And then lastly, I just put on there that we always keep a lesson plan for each group that they see. So when you think about the teachers, they have many lesson plans that they're teaching throughout the day. And then we meet in the fall, winter, and in the spring, and the teachers have a binder that they keep all of this information in. So I just listed up there the things that I would send out to the teachers in October and February. This is all the documentation that you need to bring to me so that we can collect it and we save it, so that we have information if we ever need it, so we keep that information. I love data days. It's a great day for all of us to dig in and really see what every student needs. So, if you have any questions about data days?
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to show you a small group instruction, a small group in action. This is Mrs. McNulty's first grade classroom.
Okay, we're gonna go over the words first. Today? Okay. Okay, so we're gonna go over these words. Go ahead and, just look at the words and spell it. There it goes. It's close to word, but it is where. This one's where, that's me. Like where, where, or would be the same as where would be. Well, it might help you more. Okay, so this word right here? No, not this one, right? Out. Look at the O-U in there. What does that say? Ow. Ow, yep, and then out, right? So this one, that's seen in our book, has a T on the front, so let's try this one. Do the sound with me, ready? Ow. Ready? What does the O-U say here? Ow. So this one says ow. So this one is ouch. Yeah. Ouch. Ouch. Kind of like ouch. And then this one. And then you know that. What did you say, what? It says sorry, easy though. Everybody says first time. Yeah, ouch. Let me sit down. Ouch. Let me sit down. Ouch. Look at this. See this word right here? What was this one again? Ouch. Now look at this. If you know ouch, you're going to know ouch is the same. The ending is the same.
Sorry, this is really different. This is a record.
Right, so I know we're supposed to do a fiction story. We've been talking about fiction in that picture. I know it's a fiction story, but you can learn about kangaroo. Is there anything in here that can actually teach you about what kangaroos like? That's not something like that. Even though this is a fiction story, we can still think about something we could write about. Let's think of something that the class talked about nonfiction. Something that you could learn about maybe a jelly or a kangaroo that you could write about. So you want to learn the jelly about. Give it back first. Alright, we're in mother. Mother, and then the fever. Okay, let's do mother. Mother kangaroo puts her jelly in her. What can you do in her? Jelly in her. What's the next one? Okay.
There's a whole classroom of first graders behind her doing
I know,
exactly
I
what
just-
they're supposed to do.
Because she's built that skyline in her classroom.
So we talked about that how they ready, they're tough. How, we were not talking about yeah, just like these ones, right? Go forward. Right here at the end. Right here at the end. That's the gate, right?
Craig is in the same stand for the first
Yeah, right now.
Not at all.
Okay, mother, kangaroo, put her belly in her pouch.
And she's so focused on them.
And
I
that was
was
literally
so
probably about a 35-minute lesson, so that's why it was jumping, because I needed to shorten it down. But that's normally what those small group lessons are, and you'll see, each of those things that was in there was one of those bullet points that we talked about within the essential that we read. So, she does a great job. All of the teachers do a great job, so. All right, so now Mrs. Miles is gonna come up, and she's gonna talk about bringing all of this together, everything that we talked about, she's gonna bring it all together for us.
I don't know, I don't really want to follow Amy, she was like amazing over there. So I want to talk a little bit about the data and how we use it to inform our instruction. So we have to kind of see like what it looks like after we've already done all that work, and how we kind of get those groups together. I have to warn everybody that, this is like my favorite thing ever. So, got my captive audience here, just like that. I'm super passionate about using the data because it's what our kids know and using that to actually know what to teach them, right? So we're not just like pulling stuff out and just teaching kids random things. We're looking at what each kid knows and using them. It just has such an incredible impact on all the kids to be able to look at their individual progress and see what they're doing. The assessment takes a lot of time. I mean, I think that's probably like a complaint that you'll hear from people all the time, that assessment takes a lot of time and a lot of attention. So if we're gonna spend that time doing assessment, it's so important that we use that time to inform our instruction. Otherwise, it's just a waste of our time. Time is precious, and we don't want to do that. So if we're going to take the time with these kids to assess them and do all of this stuff, we need to make sure that we're using that to better teach them. So we have to make sure that all of the assessments that we are doing have a purpose. If it doesn't have a purpose, we probably shouldn't do it. And there might be some argument that some of them don't have a purpose, like from different people. But I think if you really look at everything, they all have their purpose, and we can dig into all of them and find information and find things that are useful for teaching. So I think the other thing about assessment is that assessment should be used to help children, right? And making sure that kids know, because I think sometimes when we talk about assessment, everybody's worried about how they're gonna do, right? Like, we're worried about whether we're gonna pass or we're going to, but that's not what assessment should be. Assessment should be about their learning and never something that we're using to penalize students, right? That's the last thing we wanna do. We want them to always feel like they're constantly learning. Kids need to know that the assessments have a deeper purpose. I feel like that's what makes kids want to work harder. When they know that there's a purpose for why we're doing it. If you're just taking a test to take a test, it's not a big deal, right? And that's when we find kids that aren't doing their best. The kids have to know, and they have to understand the purpose for what we're doing. So that's one of the things that I try really hard to do, is make sure that the students have an awareness of why we're doing it. We talk all the time when we're assessing that, like, we'll talk about it and maybe call it a test, but it's always, it's okay. It doesn't matter how you do, it's okay, because no matter what you do, you're showing me the things that you know, and we're looking at the things that we don't know yet, and that's okay, because, you know, we go over all the time. That's why you're at school, right? Like, if you already knew all of this, you wouldn't have to come here. If you already knew everything you needed, like, you wouldn't have parents, you'd just be wandering around doing whatever.
All right,
But you do, you don't know everything, so we have to look at that, and that's okay. So it's really important that we collect that data and we look at the trends, we look at kind of that overall big picture of what things are our kids getting, what things are they not getting, but not just that, looking at the specific goals of each child. And I could go on for a long time talking about that, but I won't. If anybody has any interest, I'd love to go over all the numbers with you. But the big thing is making sure that we're empowering students to take ownership of that, right? These assessments should be empowering for students. It shouldn't be something that they feel stressed about. It should be something that they feel like they're showing what they know and that they're figuring out what they don't know yet. And that's okay, right? Like, using it to see. And then after they do that, making sure that we're sitting down with kids and talking about what their goals are. Because if we just give them an assessment again and never give them any feedback on it, it's just another thing they do. So we have to make sure we're giving feedback to kids and talking to kids. Kids need to make their own goals, and that's kind of that empowerment again. Making sure kids know why they're doing things and creating their own goals so that they know what they want to learn and how they're going to get there, right? Like, that's not my job to tell them. You might think it is as a teacher, but I feel like that's their job. They have to decide, what are you going to do to get there? So I think when we give that back to them, it gives them that empowerment to want to do better, right? They made their goal, they want to reach that goal. If we just tell them, we want you to do this, it's totally different, right? So we want to make sure that they're making goals that are achievable also. So that's kind of where my job comes in, is guiding them, making sure that we're getting achievable goals that they can meet. And one of the things about that is that I think sometimes we look at it and think, oh, these kids just don't want to learn. But that's really not true. Some kids just need to know why they're learning it. Or they need, there's different reasons that we can get kids to learn, right? Or different reasons we can help them. But in the end, kids want to achieve, right? They want to feel like they've done something good. But in order to do that, they have to believe that they can do it. And they have to know what their actual goal is, what they're doing. So I like to try to focus more on the goals and the starting point a little less, right? Because we have kids all over the place. I have 30 kids in my class. I can't teach the same thing to all 30 kids that are unique and have different learning needs. So we use all of that then, all that time that we just spent assessing kids, going over goals, doing all of that stuff for a reason. We use it to plan our instruction. And then you see things like the amazing Amy over there doing her groups, because she knows what those kids need, right? She's gone through, she's done all of that other work, and she knows what her kids need, and her kids know. I mean, you can watch them, and they want to do well. They know what they need to do. So the other thing about it is that I think a lot of times we talk about our struggling students because it's important. But another thing that's kind of like near and dear to my heart is the fact that when we look at kids as individuals, when we look at all this data, we're not just looking at, oh, these kids are kids that are struggling, what can we do to help them catch up? We're looking at, wow, these kids are amazing. They're doing all of this stuff. What can I do to make sure they keep growing? When they come to school, it is my goal, and I know that the staff, we talk all the time, I have best staff at Murphy ever. And it's about making sure that every kid learns something. No kid should come to school and leave without learning something that day. So it's kind of funny, one of my friends, she's gonna love this, sent me a text the other day, and I know she loves me, so it's okay, but sent me a text the other day about her son and about how she's spending her time teaching her 9-year-old how to reduce fractions. And she's like, what's going on with this math teacher? Well, clearly that's not like our overall goal, right? But that's something, he's doing great in that. So that's the next step for him. So he's working on that stuff, and that's great. But making sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. I feel like sometimes we get caught up in the other stuff, and that's when, I think that was like a big turning point for me too, is when we're looking at our data and like, hey, why aren't these kids getting better? Why aren't they doing, and then I realized, like, as I was going through, different things, I'm like, oh, no wonder, I didn't teach them that. Like, they can't learn something, I didn't teach them, right? So we have to make sure that we're teaching all of our kids and knowing what they all need to know. And then implement it, right? We have a target, we need to make sure that everything that we're doing is planned for a specific reason. We're there for a specific reason, those kids are there for a specific reason, sorry, struggling here. And then afterwards, just like monitoring them, make sure that they are meeting those goals, make sure that what we're doing is helping them get there, because again, all kids can learn, and they need to know that. They need to know that they can all achieve something. Sometimes we have to change the way we're doing it, right? And sometimes it might not be what we wanted them to learn, but they're all gonna learn something. And the thing about the small groups also, and kind of looking at data, is that we're making sure that we give like that equality to all our students. They all get equal access to our curriculum. And when I say equal access, I don't mean like they all get the exact same thing. I mean that we're teaching them what they need to know at their level, but they're all still accessing our curriculum. So, like, I think that's the big thing, is making sure that every kid knows that each step forward is another step towards success. And that comes in, we can talk about all kinds of stuff like the classroom culture and how we teach kids to know that they need to, that their purpose for being at school is to learn, and that it's okay to make mistakes. And we could go through all of those different reasons that they're there. But I think it's important for them to know that they're there for a reason. And then also, a big thing that I think is tough sometimes for everyone is making sure that after we've done all these things, that we're reflecting on it, right? Looking back and saying, okay, well, what's going well? What am I doing well? What isn't? You know, we've just done all of this assessment. What things, you know, overall were the kids getting? What things were they not getting? Because that's a piece that, you know, looking back at me, right? If we have like a big group of kids that aren't getting something, that's probably half the kids. That's probably a me problem. So, but using this data gets us there, makes us know exactly what's going on with our kids and where they are and where we want them to go. So.
Don't move. Just from a board perspective, and some of you are teachers up here, so you know this as well as what Emily just articulated, but we often hear in the world of education that there's a binary choice between building relationships with kids is on one end of the spectrum, and assessment and testing students is on the other. They're somehow mutually exclusive, right? And we hear this drumbeat of, our kids are over-tested, and high-stakes assessments and testing are bad for kids. I think what you really heard tonight, and I want to make this minor point for all of you, is that testing students with purpose is not exclusive from building a relationship with kids. And I'll pick on Emily for a minute because I spent a lot of time in her classroom. You'd be hard-pressed to find a teacher that has better relationships with students than Emily. But what you also heard her articulate this evening was a purposeful method of assessing students. So when she designs the instruction that she's going to dispense for the entire year, it's meaningful and it's impactful and it's individualized to each kid. So she's absolutely right. We're just testing to test kids, and it's just one more thing like, going to homeroom or going to lunch or taking gym. Yeah, it's a complete and utter waste of time. And the stress induced by that and the anxiety that kids are going to experience by doing a test that's high stakes. And I love what you said about being used to punish kids, meaning it's punitive, meaning if you don't know it today, you're in big, big trouble.
Right, like it's their fault.
Right, it's their fault, right? As opposed to, we hear all the time, like, well, our job is to get kids ready for real life. Well, guess what? Newsflash, in most jobs and most professions, there isn't, if you don't know it by January 10th, you're screwed. That's not reality. But a teacher has the additional task of looking at 30 kids, right? And they start on the same day, they end on the same day, but where that journey takes them is designed exactly around what they produce on those assessments. So that's a good thing, and that, conversation at the dinner table or at Christmas with your family, like, kid, all you do is take tests in school today, and what's the point? I want you to go back and rewatch and listen to some of the quotes here from Emily today, that's why we do it. There is purpose behind it, and if it doesn't, I wrote this down. If we're gonna take the time to test, it better inform our instruction, otherwise it's a waste of time. That encapsulates everything that we're about. I think that is brilliantly stated.
I think also that the kids making sure that they know that, right? Because it's fine for me to know that, right? Like I'm a teacher, I know all these things, but I need to make sure that my kids know that, because then when they go to take these tests, it's not like this big scary thing anymore. It's not something that they know that when they take, I mean, we can look at their testing we take all year, we can look at the M-STEP, right? That's the big thing that everybody, you all have feelings, and that's okay. Different feelings, but when the kids take the M-STEP, they should know why they're taking it, right? They're not taking it just to take another test, and we're not gonna tell them that. We're gonna tell them they're taking this because this is gonna help us know more about you. This is going to help other people know more about you and more about our school. So when they're taking it, they are trying to do their best because they want to make sure that, and I tell them all the time, we want to know what you know. If you do your best, I'll know what you know. If you don't do your best, and then, you are multiplying, dividing, and doing all these other things, but I think you can't add, guess what I'm gonna teach you? I'm gonna teach you how to add. And that's not gonna be super fun, right? Like, everybody wants to learn, so do your best, so I know where you are, what you need to do, and then we can move on from there. And especially, elementary kids, they don't wanna have to do something that they already know how to do, so they all wanna move on.
But one question to that is, there are kids who just don't take those tests well, and they may be like the smartest kids ever. So do you see that happen, A, and B, when you do, you obviously course correct, right? Your instruction that you plan for that student obviously is out the window because they just didn't test well. Because there are kids that just don't, no matter how much you tell them, it doesn't mean much, just do your best, they still don't do well.
Yeah, I mean, it's different. Different people do things differently. The great part about assessment and what we're talking about, like using it to inform our instruction is that it's not one test. It's all kinds of different things, right? We're using formative assessment, we're using this testing. And yes, when I see this testing, I will look at it and dive in deep and see what different things, but you also know your students, and we also have other assessments that we've done. And so if a kid just didn't do very well on this test, like, hey, I probably should look at some other things and go back and look at what he was doing in class, or what she's able to do when I'm working with her. So there's so many different ways that we can assess kids, and I think when we think about assessments, we're always thinking about those big tests. And those are important, and I do use those a lot. But there's so many other things that we use just watching our kids, right? Knowing what they can do and knowing our kids really kind of make sure that doesn't happen.
I think that goes back to Matt's point too, though, that the better you have a relationship with the student, the better test taker they're gonna be.
Absolutely.
Like, that combination means a lot. Because if they know the purpose, like you said, they have that relationship. I mean, I teach college students a little bit different, but still, it's that relationship. It's built on the fact that they trust you. And they trust that what you're telling them is correct, and it takes away that anxiety.
But even bad test takers, when you do that, you learn something.
For sure.
You learn something about that person, knowing you can talk to them the next time, hey, you may not do well on this test. We already know what you can do. In any circumstance, you know all the stuff that's on there. It's your test taking, so how do we get around it? How do we deal with it? How are you gonna deal with it when you leave me, right? When you
Yeah,
go
well,
somewhere
that's
else?
not that empowering kids,
Right.
right? To take charge of
So you
their
can
own.
still learn something from them, even if it's a bad test.
But Craig, you know as well as I do that we have a bad culture around testing. And
Oh, yeah.
what Emily said, it's okay to not know it, that's why we're in school. Like, how simple
You don't
is
need
that?
me if you know it.
That's right, you know what I mean? Show up, take a test, get your star, get a high five, and leave. Like, but to frame it that way, if you're a young learner and you're afraid to not look smart in front of your friends, every single person has felt that way in a learning environment at some point, where you're not the smartest person in the room and you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to be outed. But if there's an environment that your teacher is creating that basically says, there's going to be some bumps in the road here, and that's okay, because it's going to help me better teach you or move on.
That's what assessment should be, right? It shouldn't be, again, something that they feel bad about when they get done. It should be something that they feel proud of and that they can use in and say, you know what, I knew how to do these things, I didn't know how to do this. And then we can look at it, and they know that that's used so that they can get better at it. And it's not something we do and then we put away in the drawer and then it you know, never a single light of day again.
The biggest piece is incorporating them along the whole process, and especially at the end, helping them create their goals. That's the biggest key right there that I liked, that I heard is, they're creating their goals that they want to achieve, which is part of the biggest success.
They need guidance, don't get me wrong, because we want to make sure, the one thing is, we want to make sure that they have measurable goals that we can see when we get to it, and we want to make sure that they're achievable, because if, you know, you have a kid that's struggling, and they want to do something like way up here, we're going to like, okay, that's awesome, we're going to have that as your goal. But where's our stepping stone? Where are we going to get first? And then, you know, because you're never going to tell a kid, you can't do that, you're not going to be able to get to that. But what we will tell them is that it's going to take some steps to get there. What's the first step? How are you going to get that first step? Because we want them to be proud. Like, every kid wants to learn, and every kid wants to be proud of themselves, and they want to make other people proud of them. And so when we look at it in kind of small steps like that, everybody can achieve. Every single person can get better at something.
For sure, appropriately aged guided goals.
I just have to say, we've talked a lot about advocacy. This right here is student advocacy. She demonstrates it, and we know it's one of the highest predictors for student achievement. And that's the perfect example. So, last, do we have any other questions? I know you just asked Emily a lot. You can see why I brought Emily with me to talk about that. Because she's very passionate about it, and
That's awesome.
The one thing that kind of sits with me is just looking at every kid. She made comment about you deal with every kid in that classroom, not just the one-on-one. It's everyone that you have to look at. And, you know, I dealt with that a little bit with my youngest child, being bored, I guess you would say, in class. And so when I had Mrs. Lamerson, she wasn't Nathan back then, so she took that kid and did wonders with him. Let him go at his own speed and let him learn.
She's
So
watching right now, I hope she heard that. She was moved by you.
it's that's wonderful.
it is.
You know?
Every kid should learn every day.
Every single kid.
I think the most exciting thing is that you look at data. Let's face it, data drives our world, and it's
Absolutely.
never been known that teachers are excited about data.
Yeah.
Good job.
No problems.
I like the fact, you know, most of it, the talk was about assessing the kids. I like the fact that it's the reflection part, you're assessing teachers too, because you can know everything you want to know about the kids, and if it's still not getting through, the teachers are willing to look at themselves and assess themselves and make their own change, and that's huge too.
Well, remember, like I said, it's not punitive for kids, it's not for us either, right? Like, we should be able to look at ourselves and say,
How are we
hey,
gonna
you've
do
done
that?
this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now head into our public comment for this evening. A board meeting is a meeting of school district business held in public. It's not a public meeting. The board is not going to respond to those making public comment, but will direct the superintendent to follow up with the presenter. 30 minutes is set aside for public comment, so each presenter is being asked to keep their comments brief. The board does not comment in public on any student or employee, and asks the presenters to be respectful of any person they comment about. Christine Mortel.
Hello. So generally I try to keep it a little brief. I'm going to be a little long tonight. It is always a great task to come here and spotlight one of our support staff, paraprofessional or secretary. Tonight I'm spotlighting Ann Barrett. She's been with the district since 1995. And it's my great honor to give her the employee of the month. But I think she's almost employee of 3 decades.
And she's still only 39.
That's right. walks in the door, she treats with great respect and makes it feel comfortable, and I couldn't agree more. When my kids came from Chatfield, I'm a Chatfield mom, right? So I'm thinking I have to follow my 80s, and it was so, it's a hard transition to summer, because you're not allowed to go in the classroom whenever you feel like it. You're like, wait, what?
Maybe we need that.
And I'm like, okay, you're my best friend now. But she helps all of us. She helps the Chatfield parents transition into being regular school parents. But, you know, she's really good with information, with compassion and respect with every situation. I think that we're gonna miss you terribly, and we really have been very lucky to have you all this time. Okay.
And where's your power?
It's too old to show it.
For those who don't know, Ann is quitting. Oh wait, I mean retiring. And what is your official?
The 15th.
15.
Did I not say that? I was nervous. I was terrible.
No, it's okay. Well, we're certainly going to miss Ann. She's been an institution here.
Yeah. Maybe I'll be back Sunday.
On the 16th.
You don't drive the bus.
Oops. Sorry, you're asking man to leave for nothing, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Congrats. Okay, I think that concludes our public comment for tonight. We will go into our reports. So, Dr. Novak, would you please share with us the policy committee report?
Yes, so we met via Zoom on December 15th at 2 o'clock. Committee members attending was myself and Jamie Hofer. Members absent was Craig Watson. Others attending were Kim Seifferly, Matt Laundrie, Jennifer Tindall, and Mary Moss. The meeting was called to order at 1, actually, via Zoom conference. We discussed AG administrative guidelines 8420.02 comprehensive school threat assessment guideline. Kim Seifferly shared that there's a number of different safety and security related items that we are working to update after reviewing recommendations from both the district security assessment and the guidepost investigative report following the shooting at Oxford High School. This guideline was established to address the CSTAG process, comprehensive school threat assessment guideline, that we are currently utilizing in all our buildings. In addition, she shared who makes up the district crisis leadership team. Jennifer should go walk the committee through the CSTAG process that takes place at all our buildings, starting with who comprises a multidisciplinary threat assessment team. As administrative guidelines do not require board action, Kim will send to the entire board in an upcoming weekender, and our meeting adjourned at 1:37 p.m.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Novak. We will then go over to finance and operations. Dr. Watson, would you please share the committee report?
Certainly. So our committee members there were myself, Summer Putnam, and Lisa Novak. Others attending: Matt Laundrie, Eric Ingles, Mark Rader, Brian Batter, Julia Peruski from Bartonello, and Mary Moss. Meeting called to order at 2 via Zoom. We discussed investments of the bond proceeds. Mark shared the bond proceed investment portfolio from PFM Asset Management Company with the committee. This showed cash draws that were developed by Bartonello for the life of the bond, along with the original cost, gross and net yields, along with estimated gross and net earnings over the draw schedule. Change order less than bid threshold amount. Julia Peruski from Bartonello is gathering all the change orders that are less than the bid threshold amount, and we'll have all the information for January F&O meeting. And bid pack 5.2, bus garage paving. Bartonello recommends Shoreview Electric Company for electrical in the amount of $259,000. Eagle Excavation Inc. for site work in the amount of $1,212,500. And TG Breeze LLC for asphalt in the amount of $479,733 for a total amount not to exceed $1,951,233. And the meeting adjourned at 2:17.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Watson. That will finish our reports. We will go into our action items. First, we have our consent grouping. Approval of the minutes of December 6th, 2023. Second reading and adoption of board policy, policy 8400, school safety information, and policy 8420, emergency situations at school. Are there anything in the consent grouping anyone wish to be removed? Okay. Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
I take a motion that reading of the minutes to be waived and approved as presented.
Okay. I have a motion and a support. Mrs. McKenna?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVar?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hooper? Dr. Novak?
Aye.
Ms. Evans says aye. Motion carries. Then we have bid pack number 5.2, bus garage paving.
I'll make a motion that bid pack 5.2 be awarded to Shoreview Electric Company for electrical in the amount of $259,000. Eagle Excavation Inc. for site work in the amount of $1,212,500. And TG Breeze LLC for asphalt in the amount of $479,733 for a total amount not to exceed $1,951,233.
Support.
I have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mrs. McKenna?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVar?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mr. Lipka?
Aye.
Ms. Hooper? Dr. Novak?
Aye.
Ms. Evans says aye. Motion carries. Excuse me. That brings us to board member communications for tonight.
I'd like to go ahead and just say how excited I was to be asked and to participate in the 5-6 transition meeting. Our first meeting was held today at 4:30, and I believe there were 25 people present. We had some really great feedback. They broke us up in groups. A lot of different people were invited to this, and Wyatt and Michelle did a great job of wrangling us and keeping the time, respecting our time and making sure that we did what we were supposed to in that allotted time. And I'm excited. We've got another meeting in 2 weeks. We've got meetings 2 in February, 1 in March, another in April, and open-ended to more if necessary, because we're preparing for the 2025-2026 school year, where Roland Warner will now be 5-6 building, and that transition from the elementary and the scheduling and things like that were discussed. And I just hope that the community knows that there's so many wonderful people involved in this, and it's going to be fantastic once we get it implemented and figure out the little kinks and all the questions that were raised today. And I'm excited to be a part of it. And I just wanted to thank Michelle and Wyatt for inviting me and for asking so many wonderful people to be a part of it, because I was on this, the 2019, because I tried to remember how long ago has it been since back when we tried the first time, way back when, and I couldn't remember how many years ago was that. And she said it was 2019, and it's like, I don't even have any of the notes from it anymore, because I think it wasn't on my computer.
Wait a minute, and you invited her to be part of the committee again?
Some of it was coming back. I was like, I remember talking about some of this, but it was a long time ago. But I was so happy that we're bringing that back, and it's going to be implemented, and I think it's going to be great for the kids. It's going to be great for the elementary kids, because there's going to be more space for our kids, and then just the whole way of getting the kids back in high school, having a 9-12 high school, and having the buildings. It's going to be great. I'm really excited about that. So, thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Wyatt.
Awesome.
I just want to say thank you to the food service for the amazing meal that we had tonight. It's always a highlight of our year, I think, that we get to all get together and actually have a meal together. So, and the discussion's always good, and I just appreciate it very much. I also want to thank Murphy. Thank you guys for coming. It was a really nice presentation, and like I said, exciting to hear all the data and how it's being used. So thank you.
cover the items that I wanted to, so definitely ditto to those remarks. It's always a good opportunity for us to have our dinner. Food's always amazing, they do such a great job preparing, and it's very much appreciated. And Murphy, I mean, guys keep doing what you're doing, it's really working and we appreciate it. It's hard work, but all the data collecting, data analyzing, implementing the plan, and actually executing, that's a lot, so we appreciate everything. With that, I will turn it over to you, Superintendent Audrey.
Thank you, Madam President. There's only one thing to talk about right now. You all live in the land of champions now. Nikki, I know how much Michigan's victory meant to you as a Michigan State girl yourself. You're welcome. You're welcome. Everyone else is looking up. University of Michigan, Dr. Novak, basking in the glory. You're a champion. Congratulations. Nikki, so are you.
I am.
You're a champion.
For the state of Michigan.
And you've got the Michigan Wolverines.
Yes.
I know I worked really hard for this season and I wear these clothes and I yield back the balance of my time, Madam President.
I just have to say, where I went to school, we've been undefeated since 1919, so just,
No football team?
I was gonna say,
Never lost.
the math debate, what?
Can someone make the appropriate motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Please.
And who supported, I didn't hear. Mrs. McConnell. Aye. Mrs. Labar.
Aye.
Dr. Larson.
Absolutely.
Mr. Lucas.
Aye.
Ms. Hope. Dr. Novak.
Aye.
Mrs.